secret mall apartment. It's a secret apartment in a mall. Or at least it was for a few years in the early aughts in Providence, Rhode Island. This is a documentary that has been in a few cities and is sort of expanding, so we're catching up with it. It did really, really well in its opening weekend for a small specialty box office number, I believe.
Cool.
So we wanted to catch up with it for you.
I just had this idea. Oh, we should live in the mall.
It seemed like a very absurd fantasy and perhaps a great challenge.
Yeah, it's executive produced by Jesse Eisenberg and directed by Jeremy Workman, who I think is a really terrific doc filmmaker. I remember screening his film Who is Henry Jaglom back in the 90s when I was a festival programmer. He is the son of the legendary Chuck Workman. So yeah, this is a movie about a secret mall apartment in the early 2000s. A Rhode Island School of Design instructor and his wife and at the time and several students found that in this new mall, Providence Place, that had been built in Providence, Rhode Island, there were these sort of like little dead zones that were kind of hidden, that if you figured out how to access them and snuck through some corridors, that you could get to them. So they found it, and at first just sort of like kind of hung out there and occasionally spent the night there, but then started turning it into an actual apartment. And it was kind of this sort of living art piece where they put an entire armoire up there, and filled it with dishes. They had sofas, they had, they would make meals there. They would sometimes sleep over. And it was a closely held secret between 8 people. And it wasn't just sort of a way to kind of like pull a prank, but at the same time, it was kind of commenting on the fact that developers who were trying to revitalize the downtown Providence area had torn down a bunch of the old abandoned mills, which artists and musicians were using as creative spaces and for studio spaces. And now suddenly those were obliterated so they could put up, a grocery store or a shopping plaza or whatever. Mm. So, occupying the mall in this way kind of felt like taking back a bit. The movie really deftly combines like new interviews with, they had a lot of vintage footage because they used one of the sort of early digital cameras that would also shoot video, very grainy, raw video. But these students and the RISD instructor would kind of like secretly film all the time. So they have a ton of old footage that we see them recreate the apartment in a studio. And like, the main guy, Michael Townsend, is talking to this film's production designer about how to build it out and what the shape of the room was and all that kind of stuff. And so they staged some scenes in the recreated apartment just to sort of give you a feel for what it was like. And then, of course, once they're discovered, there's news footage and newspaper clippings about the whole thing. Michael Townsend is to this day barred from going to to Providence Place, although like all malls, Providence Place has seen better days, and it too is suffering from the pandemic and the internet and all the other things that have sort of made malls somewhat more of an endangered species. But boy, 2003. Peak mall time, apparently, and that's when this whole experiment started. I found this documentary really fascinating. Not just that they have a great story to tell, but they tell it really well, and all of the participants are involved here and give new interviews. And apparently, apart from Michael Townsend, none of them had ever been fingered for this before. So this is the first time they're kind of stepping forward and owning up to their part in this whole thing that happened. So yeah, I dug this movie.
I thought it was really good too, and the kicker in the title card I found very entertaining too, and just so hilariously ironic at this point. So I like this a lot too, and yeah, it does benefit greatly from the fact that they shot so much of their own footage, whether that's them like walking around the mall, like furtively like shooting footage of while they're walking and talking. I think that people do all the time now, where you just like shoot yourself talking on your phone in the mall. They had to do like in a secret way. We see some pretty intimate conversations there at the food court and in the apartment, and they're not afraid to put themselves out there, and it raises all these interesting questions about what is art. It's work. They're putting their creative instincts into this. It is making a statement about society, about capitalism. It's making a statement about things that impact all of us in a way that art could and should. So I think that's really interesting too. But also we learned that the secret mall apartment was like a side project to what their main job was this tape project. I had not heard of this prior to this, but
me neither.
Like Michael Townsend would go to like hospitals or wherever and would incorporate kids who are maybe like special needs kids or kids who are living in poverty to like teach them how anyone can do art. You can do art all around you all the time. And this is the thing with like masking tape on walls.
Yeah.
And so the secret mall apartment kind of taps into that idea of like, you can do art. You can make art. Art is what you make of it. And it could be all around us, or it could be a thing that just you know about to make your little statement against the world. Yeah, I thought it was really entertaining. And also it's the thrilling pace of a heist quite frequently. Like as you watch them putting it together and knowing that at any second they can get caught.
Yeah.
And I think because it was 20 plus years ago, like maybe there wasn't the surveillance that exists now. Like if you and I wanted to go live at the Century City Mall,
we'd get busted in 10 minutes.
I don't think we could do that because there's so much surveillance footage everywhere. This reminded me too of that Spielberg film, The Terminal, where Tom Hanks just like lives at the airport for a long time. So yeah, watching the whole thing with the cinder blocks is crazy. Watching them like hoist entire couches and armoires up this narrow ladder, like just the dedication alone to this is so awesome. I don't want to do anything that badly.
The realization that there's like an emergency emergency exit alarm that isn't really attached to anything, that just makes a noise, and they realize that no one's coming and no one is paying attention to it or monitoring it. It's just there to act as a deterrent. And so once they figure that out, they're like, all right, well, we can just open this door whenever we want, you know?
Yeah. And speaking of like getting in and out though, what this mall represents is like, it makes such a statement about what kind of city Providence wanted to be, because the main entrances opened to the wealthier side of town. When you're going up 95, like between Connecticut and Boston, the Providence Place Mall is this like behemoth fortress right on the highway. There's like a Dave & Buster's. It's a giant mall, but you can really only get to it from like the nicer side of town. So that makes a big statement about who they want their clientele to be. So by being these like underground artists who've infiltrated the place, they're kind of like poking a hole in that approach to their clientele.
Yeah, and I think it sort of gets into the whole idea of like, what is public space, you know, and what is the community, you know, space look like, and who has access to that, and who decides who the community even is, you know. Yeah, I think this gets into a lot of different ideas that are really fascinating, and you know, because everybody involved is an artist and still an artist, they're all really articulate about what they did and why and what their motivations were, and the sort of nuts and bolts of just actually implementing this thing. So yeah, I think it's really terrific.
One of them does this really beautiful model of the mall.
Yes.
To show where the little like hidden space was in between the two buildings. And like when he opens it up, it's like, oh
yeah, it's
like,
all made out of wood. It's really beautifully done.
Really neat.
And like, also like
do their work.
While the secret mall apartment was going on, they were doing the masking tape art like in New York, you know, 5 years after, you know, 9/11 as a tribute to the first responders. And then also they were doing like they were marking the anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing. Yeah. So, you know, they're not making any money off any of this stuff, and they're processing a lot of tragedy that's happening in the 90s, early 2000s, and so this is almost this sort of like lark that they get to go back to and like get to be involved in something that isn't like super depressing like the other you know, public art spaces they were dealing with, you know.
But it's of a piece with those masking tape projects because it's ephemeral.
Yes.
Like it's meant to pop up someplace unexpected and not last forever.
Exactly.
So that's kind of cool too. Anyway, I will say from 1 to 10, I will say like an 8. This is a cool movie. Maybe you could have dug a little deeper into the people themselves, but I was always entertained. Yeah,
no, I'm an 8 as well, and yeah, you know, we get some insight from like Townsend's mom and brother, which are great. And I was thinking like, what else do they have to say? You know, not to mention the ex-wife and like a lot of different stuff there. But yeah, what's here is all fascinating, and I think raises a lot of really cool questions. And you know, this is the kind of movie you want to see with friends and talk about afterwards.
Right. Like, would you do that? Would you guys live in the mall? Let us know.